Okay, great. Well, good evening. My name is Joseph Malcarney. I am the chairman of the Town of Clinton Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's meeting via Zoom. Tonight's meeting has been convened in accordance with the Governor's March 13th, 2020 Executive Order 202.1 as extended, which suspends certain provisions of the open meeting law to allow ZBA, this particular zoning board of appeals, to convene a meeting via video conference. In accordance with the executive order, the public has been provided with the ability to view tonight's ZBA meeting via YouTube. A link to the town's YouTube channel has been provided in the meeting notice, and a transcript will be provided at a later date. I will introduce my colleagues on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and when I do, if you can just wave your hands around so people know who you are. John Calogero, Charles Cannon, Norma, I don't believe is with us quite yet, Ron Mostello, Arthur Weiland, and Russell Tompkins. On the agenda for this evening, we have the BCDE Family LLP and the Delfano area variance. We will start with the BCDE Family LLP variance, and who do we have that's representing that?
You have Doug Larson, I'm the applicant from Larson Architecture Works, and Jacob Harden from my office, who has prepared the drawings and the documents.
Okay, great. So why don't you just start by kind of giving us a quick explanation of why you're here, and then Charles will turn it over to you to take it from there.
Okay, so I'm just going to give you the background here and turn it over to Jacob. Okay. Our clients purchased this 80-acre parcel on East Meadowbrook Lane a little over a year ago, and it's a beautiful piece of property with several meadows and a pond. And as you probably know, East Meadowbrook is a beautiful road. Yeah. They want to keep the property intact and use it as sort of a family compound. They have 2 children who are starting families, and we would like to renovate the house. We've already been to the planning board because the addition impinges upon the wetland setback a little bit, and we've already gotten conceptual approval on that. And we'd like to remove one accessory structure which is in the way. So that's already been to the planning board. In the course of that, we have discovered that we need some zoning relief. So I'm going to turn it over to Jacob, and he's going to walk you through what we're requesting.
Okay. Good evening. As Doug said, this is an existing site, and most of these structures existed before the current zoning. Many of them are here from when it was farmlands, early 1800s, and other structures came to be during a time it was a camp. That camp closed in 1972, and it returned to a private family residence, family estate. And as Doug said, that's what the owners want to maintain it in that state. They don't want to revert this back to camp. It would stay a private family estate. The main thing is that they wanted to maintain these existing structures, with the exception to we're doing a renovation to the main house that Doug talked about. And we are improving that immediate area. Adjacent to that, as you can see in this graphic on the screen share Arlene has pulled up, this is the area adjacent to red. That largest building is the farmhouse. That's what's being renovated, and we're seeking approvals. We have applications in with the DEC and the Department of Health that we're reviewing the request for information. So that's in the process. And so in the meantime, we wanted to kickstart the approval for a new pool and pool house. And so we applied for a building permit for that pool house and the pool. I think, Arlene, if you go down one more page, right there, this is what we, the one that was just on the screen that with the brown siding is what we propose to become the pool house. It's currently in the wetland regulated controlled area, the 100-foot buffer. And we're seeking to remove that and relocate it to where, to the rear of that house in that red area, where there's currently an A-frame. This A-frame has plumbing, septic, electric. It's a few more pages down, or we could look at this graphic, that large white block just to the rear of the house is the A-frame. That is in the area where we're seeking to put the pool and convert this shed, which is currently a shed, into a pool house. We might reuse some of those existing electrical and water connections, but the septic would be all new as part of larger site improvements that we're doing. So ultimately, what that kicked in was that the number of accessory structures that we have came into question. It was determined that we have 8 accessory structures at the current time. Our proposal in the end would result in 8 accessory structures because we are removing that A-frame and replacing it with, which is right here, what you see on the screen. We're seeking to demolish this. We do have planning board approval to demolish this. We're waiting on the building department approval, but we didn't want to obviously demolish this before we worked through this process. So since we're removing a structure and adding a structure, we would have a net of neutral with 8 structures, or if the pool house, which is the relocated shed, and the pool was considered as 1 accessory structures, then it might be deemed that we have 1 less and have 7 accessory structures. So that's what we're here for, for relief on one of the accessory structures. And the zoning enforcement officer felt that because of the number of accessory structures, the shed that we seek to relocate is a non-conforming use. Relocated to another area if it's non-conforming. So it's because of the number of structures, he's saying that would need relief to relocate that to a different part of the property. Right here, what you have is the site plan Arlene has pulled up. You can see to the rear, that is the west of the house is the proposed pool with a terrace and that relocated shed that we would convert into a pool house, which is not for dwelling. If Arlene, you go to that last page, just one more page towards the end, we have a little plan, proposed plan for that pool house right there, which would just have a bar to it, a changing and bathing area, and some storage and mechanical to hide the pool equipment and pool toys, etc.
Great, thank you very much. Charles.
Yeah, there was a lot of paperwork on this. I appreciated it. The drawings and the illustrations really helped to get a grasp of the proposal. There are a couple of interesting issues here. And I think it's worth the zoning board talking through this question about section 250-81A. It's 3 of these accessory structures are presumably conforming. It's not entirely clear, and our zoning law doesn't appear to be all that informative on how you would decide which 3 are conforming, and therefore moving one of those 3 would not fall under that category. But nonetheless, as I interpret it, the overall project is reducing the total nonconformity of the parcel. In recent, and Arlene or Joseph or others can correct me, but we have begun to consider a pool house to be integral to a pool, and therefore the combined pool and pool house represent an accessory structure. So by my counting, the number of non-conforming accessory structures would go from 5 to 4, plus the 3 that are allowed under the zoning law. The other issue that spoke to me was that the structure to be preserved, moved, and reused, I don't know how old it is. The parcel access suggests it may have been built around 1900. I think that it's hard to know the exact date, but nonetheless, it certainly has some architectural historical value. I was pleased to see that there was consideration of retaining it. Hopefully it's structurally sound enough that you can get it up on jacks and move it, but that's people have been moving houses for hundreds of years, so it's not that complicated a process. So that was my initial take on this, and I'd like to hear from others on the zoning board. Oh, you want me? I should read the planning.
Just recap the planning board.
Yeah, I'll recap. The planning board at its January 20th meeting made a positive recommendation to the ZBA on the requested variances regarding these accessory structures. They note, whereas they're requesting variances to demolish the existing A-frame, construct a new pool at said A-frame location, and relocate and convert an existing shed into a pool house with bath and wet bar. This is a large property, 80 acres, in an AR3 zoning district. It's not in the Ridgeline Scenic and Historic Protection Overlay District, nor is it in a critical environmental area. They note that the variances requested are substantial, but however, if the variances are granted, there will be no net increase, or in fact, there is, based on recent decisions by the zoning board, be a net decrease in the number of accessory structures. They note no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood. This is far back from the road and not really visible from the road. The planning board has a lot of experience with this project because of both the demolition and the wetlands permits. So they've been over this before. I don't feel that it would have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood. And so they make a positive recommendation. Motion carried 7-0.
Great. So you're opening it up for comments from other board members.
Mm-hmm.
So any comments from the board members or discussion about what section of the law that John mentioned or Charles mentioned, and also kind of generally what we are accepting for pool and pool houses, considering that as one accessory structure.
Yeah, if I can comment, I appreciate the apparent effort to preserve the existing buildings. Again, like Charles, I'm not sure how successful you guys are going to be moving that structure. I'm sure some experts could do it, but it's, in my opinion, a wonderful thing to try to keep those kinds of buildings in use when there's still some use left in them. And the project does not seem, overwhelming for the property. It's resulting in a slight decrease in nonconformity, which is ultimately the goal of zoning law. And also, like Charles, I really appreciated the paperwork you guys did to make this project crystal clear and very easy to understand. And thank you.
Thanks, John. Arthur, you have looked like you were about to make a comment.
Yeah, to tell the applicant, I emailed the board members to mention to the board members that I have a concern for the density in the future on this area. And I reminded the board members of another situation where we granted a variance with a condition which would isolate the density from future development. This is an AR3 district, so on a potential 3-acre site, you could have 4 basically living units. Currently, there are 4, if my memory serves me at this point. I think even if this was a 6 acres, it should only have 2 residences. And maybe 2 accessory structures. I don't know, but my concerns that I voiced to the board were that if it, like we did with Robert Shaw, there was a condition that in the future, should this parcel be subdivided, that a section of the parcel would isolate this density from other developments. Otherwise, it seems like a very reasonable, decent activity. You're taking a structure out of a buffer zone. Everything is in place. I finally noticed that the septic to the A-frame is going to service the pool house. All that is, grandfathered as is in place. I'm just thinking of the future. That's, I think, a summary of what I have as a concern.
Thank you, Arthur. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. I went down and visited the site today, and I see nothing negative about the proposal. I think it's well planned out. I don't think that it's necessary that we put any stipulations on it for future. I mean, it is what it is. If people want to, and all these things are grandfathered in, that was the reason for having the exception to things that occurred before zoning was put into place. So I think that the proposal here is good. I have no problem with it at all, but I don't think that we should be adding other things to it because then you're kind of negating what was grandfathered in and taking away the rights that are there at the time. So that's my only comment.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Any other comments? I would like to make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. At this time, we open this up to the public. So if any of you have comments to make, again, now's your time. And if you do, if you could start by stating your name and your address.
Sorry, I was muted during the board discussion and I didn't realize it. So
Go ahead, Noah.
may I speak?
Sure.
Okay. I'd like the board to be consistent, and I think they have a wonderful proposal. But I think that the zoning regulations that were in place a very long time ago could be modified or at least accommodated in some degree to our current standards. And so I don't agree with putting additional restrictions on this. I think it wouldn't hurt to protect the area from higher density population, because I don't think they intend to. So I would like to hear them speak, but I don't think it would hurt to be consistent with such things as we've done in the past, like the Robert Shaw.
Do you have a particular recommendation, Norma?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was so tied up until 4 o'clock this afternoon with all the things I had to do for the other application. I don't have a particular recommendation, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Not a problem.
I've been really tied up. I think Art's suggestion that it be held to the 10 acres is not a bad idea. I don't want to do anything negative to applicants that have followed the rules and
Mhm.
obviously put a lot of thought into anything. So um, I just don't think it's a bad idea to put some kind of restriction on making that area opening to a higher density.
Okay,
And I apologize for not putting more thought into it, but I've really been tied up.
yeah, that's all right. Arthur, did you want to comment on?
Just to say that putting a note on a survey that in the future, and even if you took 3 acres times 4 residents, that's 12 acres. But
Yeah.
in the future, this parcel shall, if subdivided, contain one section that is of a size to accommodate the 4 residences, the 4 dwelling units. And that shall be determined by future subdivisions. The planning board, it was pointed out that we shouldn't, this is not the zoning prerogative to do planning, which is true, but it is the zoning's prerogative to have conditions. It is the zoning prerogative to under take into consideration the master plan, which is what it was called, the comprehensive plan currently, for low density or density in relation to various zoning districts. It requires very little at this point in time of the owners to make that stipulation part of an official survey
Okay.
notation. Yeah, Charlie wants to.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously share the concern about the loss of large parcels in the town. We've seen the gradual disappearance, over the last 30, 40 years in the number of parcels that have this kind of acreage. Years ago, for the CAC, I put together a list of all the parcels in the town that were of 80 acres or larger, and it fit on one piece of paper in the town. But I guess as a matter of principle, I'm fundamentally opposed to encumbering variance requests and variances granted with what are fundamentally fairly unrelated goals. So it's true, we do have a broad, it's one of the most basic aspects of our town master plan is to try to protect open space. But we have a variety of tools for doing this. I would rather see, for instance, I think this property would be a wonderful candidate for an easement from the Dutchess Land Conservancy. But in that case, there would be public or private funds to compensate the landowners for the loss for giving up the right to subdivide in the future. I would suspect that the current owners have no interest in subdividing, but of course, owners change. And so, I'm sympathetic to the notion of trying to protect this property, but I'm personally uncomfortable with the notion of sort of horse trading here, that we try to get something from them. I find that this request is quite reasonable and consistent with our zoning law. And so I'm just uncomfortable, Arthur and Norma, I have enormous respect for your history in this town and for how much you care about it. And I think I share that passion for the open space in the town, but I'm personally uncomfortable with burdening the variance request with that kind of extra language.
Arthur?
The point, I think, of respecting grandfathered property is to not take value from property owners. And in this case, I wouldn't be seeking to take value from future actions of the property owner of this parcel. In the future, the property owner can do things with this parcel, which, for instance, maybe some relative in the future might want to have a house, or it might need to have a subdivision, whatever. That future value will still be there. I don't perceive that we're taking any value from, it's a little arguable, but significant value from the property owners in pursuing this community goal.
It's just still to me stretching beyond what I consider to be a legitimate condition for a variance. That's just the way I view, you know, we've all done the same training, you know, from the Department of State over or how to structure variances. And it's a matter of judgment how far we feel we can legitimately go with these conditions. This one's sort of a bridge too far for me, but I'm just one member here, so I'll shut up.
I think that Charles has said it much better than I have said it, but I agree with everything he said. I don't think we should put a contingency on granting this variance and require something in return for it. I think it's a great proposal. I see no problem with it, and I think we should grant the variance without any strings attached.
Okay. Arlene?
Can I point out that if they were to subdivide in the future or wish to develop the parcel in a different way, they would be subject to the current restrictions in terms of density.
Right.
And, you know, the whole thing would be up in the air again to be balanced, just as we're balancing it again this evening.
Yeah, and I would think, to your point, John, that likely it wouldn't be, if they wanted to break that piece off, it would likely be less than, it would likely be in that 12-acre area. But Arlene, go ahead.
So the question is enforcement, Arthur. So like, let's say you guys agree that no subdivision. How do we do that? Right now, there's no survey. If the only time that could happen that it's going to be recorded in the county is if, let's say, they do a lot line adjustment, they subdivide. But how do we do the restriction right now to be recorded, to be on the plat and to be recorded? They can't just submit.
Same way it was done with Robert Shaw, and this isn't a restriction on subdivision. It's it's not the way you phrased it at the beginning. Which I can't quite remember, it's a little slightly different, but it would just be
no the limit. The thing with Robert Shaw, the only reason why he was able to put on the map is because they did a lot line adjustment. So when they did a lot line adjustment, and then we said to put that restriction from the variance before. That's how it became recorded to the counny. But otherwise, like this one.
I disagree that that's the only way that it can be done. Nonetheless, just agree with that statement. But I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Ron, did you have a comment?
I guess to, not so much a comment, but to echo what Charles and Russ and John have already stated. I realize there's precedent for it with Robert Shaw, but I almost feel like because these current owners are larger parcel owners, they're being somewhat penalized. And I think, you know, it should solely be addressed as the project at hand at face value. And if there's a project down the road, it'd be incumbent upon the current owners or maybe future owners to proceed the same way they are tonight with respect to a future project. But you know, I'm new at this and I'm taking it all in and I see both sides. I've known this property since, you know, I was a little kid, so I'm familiar with it, and I'm pleased that it's going to be, you know, renovated and utilized as a family compound. And I'm sympathetic to, you know, maintaining it, you know, in its current state, you know, for generations to come. So I see both sides, but I'm leaning towards what Charles and John and Russ have stated already. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any comments from the architects while you hear us all talk?
Yeah, we're still in the public hearing, I believe. So
Yeah, we are.
You want to close the public hearing?
No. Let's keep it open. We're kind of in the middle of things. So
Let me just add to what Ron said, is that I see the value of both approaches to the property. I just wanted to point out that they would be subject to a review in the future if they tried to increase the density. That was my main reason. So I do see both value, value to both approaches.
Okay.
I think you're asking for a comment from us. I think,
Yeah. Based upon our conversation, you could provide us some insight either that the owner has or comments.
well, I know the owners purchased this property to save it from being subdivided, and there were developers circling. So I think we all owe them a debt of gratitude. And I think, as Mr. Calogero, I think, pointed out, any replatting or lot line adjustment would go to the planning board anyway, and that's the chance to address the issue that you're concerned about. I think the idea, Mr. Canham's idea about talking to the DLC is interesting, and frequently I do advise clients to do that. And as you point out, a DLC easement would offer them financial remuneration for giving up development rights, which they would not be compensated for if the ZBA were to put a restriction on it. I really haven't discussed this with the client other than to tell them to expect the unexpected. And so this is the unexpected. So I would need to talk to them. I mean, if you folks are considering asking them to consider something, I would need to talk to them and come back to the next meeting.
I was not proposing that any sort of condition that required easement. I was just suggesting that I personally believe that easements are a valuable tool in this town for protecting open space, and we're lucky to have a very active land trust in the area that is working in both in this town and other towns.
I'm very familiar with the DLC and the work that they do. And many people I work for are DLC contributors and actually put their land in trust. So it's something that we'll talk to them about.
I think I'll also add this is a unique property, and as Doug said, it would be subject to additional review in the event of a subdivision. Also, this property, because of the wetland component in itself, does limit the acreage that can be divided. So the property in its current state does limit, in some ways, what the subdivision would happen in the future, in addition to the review required by the town.
Thank you. Arthur.
Having been involved in environmental issues in the town, the owners might be interested. This township is one of the most wildlife friendly townships in the county, because there are very few high volume roads intersecting the township. We're sort of surrounded on the edges with high volume roads, but that allows wildlife corridors to be more usable for wildlife. So it's a great benefit for those people who like to enjoy this environment. So the conservation that Charlie's talking about,
in other words, watch out for the bears when you put up your bird feeder.
bears.
True.
Yes.
Yes, I had that problem this spring. Disappearing bird feeders.
All right, any other comments from the public? All right, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Additional discussion from the board? Okay, Charles, your motion.
Yeah, I apologize in advance. This was fairly long. I move that the Town of Clinton Zoning Board of Appeals grant the requested variances to section 250-22A4, limiting the number of accessory structures, and section 250-81A, limiting the relocation of a lawful non-conforming building to BCDE Family LP on property located at 191-195 East Meadowbrook Lane in the Town of Clinton, tax parcel number to be filled in, and located in an AR3 zoning district. Specifically, we grant the variances required to construct a pool on the location of the existing A-frame accessory dwelling unit and move an existing accessory structure described below to the side of the pool to be used as a pool house. Factors. 1, the 80-acre property contains a principal dwelling unit and a total of 8 pre-existing accessory structures, 3 of which are accessory dwelling units. Section 250-22A4 limits parcels to only 3 accessory structures. Thus, 5 of the existing accessory structures are non-conforming. 2, the applicants propose to demolish one of the accessory dwelling units and build an in-ground pool at that location. They have received a demolition permit from the town. They also seek permission to relocate one of the accessory structures, an approximately 16-foot by 22-foot, one-story shed to the side of the pool to be retrofitted as a pool house. 3, changes to pre-existing non-conforming buildings are addressed in section 250-81A, which states that no such building should be enlarged, extended, or placed on a different portion of the lot, except as provided in Article 6 of non-conforming uses and structures. That article does not specifically address conditions under which such a structure can be moved. 4, the actions proposed by the applicants would not increase the number of non-conforming structures. Past decisions by the Zoning Board of Appeals that considered pool houses are so integral to pools that the combined pool house can be treated as one accessory structure. Under that reasoning, the proposed action would reduce the number of non-conforming structures from 5 to 4, with 7 total accessory structures. 5, the shed that they propose to relocate for use as a pool shed appears in good condition and of potentially historical significance. Preventing relocation of the shed under a strict reading of section 250-81 would be at odds with goals of maintaining older structures within the town and the specific proposals here to reduce the overall level of nonconformity by effectively reducing the number of nonconforming accessory structures on the parcel. 6, granting the requested variances will not have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood. Applicants have received the necessary wetland permits from the town of Clinton and have applied for the needed permits from New York State DEC and the Dutchess County Board of Health to protect nearby wetlands and the pond. 7, the requested variance is substantial, but that does not preclude granting the variance. 8, the alleged difficulty was self-created, but again, that does not preclude granting the variance. 9, the benefits sought by the applicants cannot be achieved by other means. 10, the properties in question are not in a critical environmental area or the Ridgeline Scenic and Historic Protection Overlay District. And last but not least, 11, an area variance is a type 2 action under SECRA and requires no further review. I propose 2 conditions: 1, that all fees have been paid, and 2, that all required permits have been obtained from DEC and the Dutchess County Board of Health.
Great. Second for discussion.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. John? Oh, you're muted, John. There you go.
Okay.
Yep. There you go.
I think the proposal is a fair one, as I said before. And, you know, it's very difficult to know what the future will bring. I don't know how many protections we can put on things to make the town perfect or the world perfect. And you have to have some trust. But I guess if I have to come down on one side or another in this issue, I would trust the town and future boards to help keep our goal of open space a realistic one.
Thank you. Further discussion from the board?
I agree with John's statements of what he just said. I second it.
Okay. All right. Any other further discussion about the motion? Okay, we're going to vote now, and I vote is in favor of granting the variance. I will read your names off, and if you could respond with your vote. Russell Tompkins.
Aye.
Arthur Weiland.
Anybody want to go get a cup of tea?
You can always abstain.
Yes, just deciding whether I want to abstain or vote aye, because I do think, even though John has a very positive statement, that it will be looked at in the future if something was going to change, and we'd hope that those people in the future would still respect the desire of the majority of the community, at least at this point in time, I think, for open space and apparent rural existence. One thing we can predict in the future is the actions that we take under zoning now. We are structuring the future to a degree now. With that said, I'll vote aye.
Okay, thank you. Ron Mostello?
Well, I appreciate the thought and the gravity of the situation, especially Arthur's comments. But at the end of the day, I vote in favor of it.
Okay. Norma Dolan?
I think the applicants have been extremely honest. I compliment them for that. I don't know who we would be dealing with in the future. Honesty is a very important ingredient. But in light of the fact that they've been so honest, although I almost abstained, I'm going to vote aye.
Okay, thank you, Norma. Charles Cannon?
Aye.
John Calogero?
Aye.
And my vote is aye. So your conditional variance has been granted. Any other questions you have, feel free to reach out to Arlene. And thank you all for your time. And we'll continue on with the next applicant.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you really considered this well, and I appreciated the time you took.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate your honesty.
Yes, thank you for your time as well. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Night.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the Del Forno. Am I pronouncing that right?
You're muted right now.
Okay.
Ed, you gotta unmute.
Unmute.
At the bottom,
Got
there's
it.
the mic.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
yes, Del Forno.
Del Forno, good. Now I saw the guitar. Does that mean
Oh.
that Bill will be playing for us? Or?
If that makes it any better, sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what you play for us after we're done with this. So if you wouldn't mind kind of giving us a rundown on what you're asking
Sure.
the zoning board to consider, and then Norma will take it from there.
Sure. First, I wanted to thank the members that did stop by over the last 2 days to take a look, because I know even though there were some photos and stuff presented, the fact that they came here and walked around with me and saw things, that was very much appreciated. It was Russ and John Caligaro and Mr. Weiland, and maybe a couple others that I forgot.
I was there and you weren't home, so.
Oh, yes, I heard. Somebody told me, I think Ron might have told me that, yes.
So
So
people
thank you for coming, Norman.
No, people can appear, you may not have been home, so. there may
Yeah.
be Others.
So thank you. I thank all the members for that. So I'm requesting to complete a building, and I want to complete it, and it is where it stands because it's the only place that I could put the building. I did explain it to the people that were here. Because of the topography, I only have a limited spot to put that building. If I were to move it forward at the 50-foot mark, it makes it very difficult for trucks to come in. It makes it difficult for me to plow my driveway. One person, I think it was Arthur Weiland, suggested one spot, but if I dig into that hill there, I know I have a little backhoe. I've tried it. There's rock under there. If I did put it there, the grade in the back goes up the hill, and the water is going to come right down, and it's going to wash against the slab, and eventually it'll wash out that slab. So in a nutshell, I did consider many other places to put that, but where it stands is the only place where it could go.
Okay, Norma?
Well, should I read the planning board motion first?
That'd be a great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, because I also have sent out to the board a list of talking points and a timeline, which I'd like to address after I read the planning board motion, because a lot of this occurred after the planning board meeting.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm not gonna go into all the blah blah about the property number ends in
Mhm.
707022. At the Town of Clinton Planning Board meeting held on January 19th, 2020, regarding the above subject application, the following motion was made. Mr. Auspitz motion that the Town of Clinton Planning Board is making a whereas applicants Edward and Donna Marie Del Forno seek a recommendation from the Town of Clinton Planning Board pursuant to section 250-95E for an area variance regarding a proposed shed garage, which is already under construction. It's not proposed, on their 8.18 acre property at 137 Schultzville Road in the Town of Clinton. And applicants state that the proposed structure will be 14 by 24, and that including a 40 square foot storage area, like a bump out, will have a total area of 376 square feet. Applicants seek a variance because the structure is located only 27, it says inches, but that's feet, from the side of the property. The minimum side setback is 50 feet, and thus the applicants seek an area variance of 23 feet. We'll discuss those numbers later. Okay, that's me speaking. 4, applicants state that they have only a minimal amount of level ground on which the garage can be constructed, giving the steep hill and shale ledge on other parts of their property. And without the area variance, trucks and emergency vehicles would not be able to turn around if the shed were built elsewhere. 5, applying the factors for an area variance set out in section 250-98D, the structure will not cause a change in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. There's a structure of similar size on the adjoining property and near the proposed shed/garage. Applicants state that their structure will be landscaped. And number 6, the benefit sought cannot be achieved by other means given the relatively small amount of level ground and proximity to the driveway on the property. And 7, the proposed variance will not have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. And there's a lot going on the screen, and I can't read this and see am I missing anything?
No.
No.
Okay, all right, I just see it changing. Okay. Will not have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. Although the structure will be visible from Schultzville Road, there is, as indicated, a similar size structure located next to it on the adjoining property. On the other hand, the proposed garage will be visible from and located near to the neighbor's structure. 8, the variance sought is substantial and the difficulty is self-created. 9, there is, however, a significant problem with this application. It was filed only after the zoning enforcement officer issued a violation because no building permit had been granted. At that time, construction was well underway, and it appears that the building was already framed out and sided. 10, applicant states that he was unaware that a 370 square foot building required a building permit, although the applicant is a licensed real estate agent, I believe he's a broker. 11, because the role of the planning board regarding area variances is limited to making a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, and the planning board does not wish to limit any actions the ZBA may choose to make with regard to the fact that construction had advanced to a considerable degree without seeking a building permit. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Clinton Planning Board makes a neutral recommendation. And for those of us that are new to the board, that is sort of unusual. Okay. Neutral recommendation with regard to the applicant's request for an area variance to permit them to complete the construction of a proposed shed and garage that would have a minimum side setback of 27 feet instead of the required 50 feet, but recommends that if a variance granted, that it be so conditioned on the building being landscaped with mature evergreen trees, so the shed garage is fully screened from the adjoining property. That's the planning board motion.
Yep, do you have further discussion you want to lead, either from your email or other, Norma?
I have talking points, but
yeah,
when the time comes.
Yeah, are there any comments from the board before Norma goes into the talking points that she emailed us?
Joseph, can you repeat that? I'm turning my volume up a little bit.
Sure.
I can't hear him very well either. So
I'll talk later. So is there any discussion prior to Norma going through her talking points that she emailed us? Any other comments from the board? Charles?
Yeah, one of the documents we were given is there were many copies of essentially a plat map description of the property, and one of them has some numbers added in with distances from the house to the boundary, which give a distance of 123 feet from the house to the property line. I guess, in particularly that photo that was just up there, the building looks to be planned to be 24 feet deep. So you could still put the this structure 49 feet from the house on that already what appears to be pretty clearly a flat area that's sort of graded, and still be 50 feet away from the property line. So I'm afraid I'm having trouble being convinced that the structure right now is, let's see, let me do my 20 is, well, it's 75 feet, 74 feet from the house as opposed to 49 feet. And I guess I do not understand the need to be 74 feet away from the house and within the setback as opposed to being 49 feet from the house and not in the setback.
Thank you. Charles? Before we go on, do you have Mr. Del Forno, do you have?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so I did address that. And for the members that were here, I'm hoping that they saw the same thing. I put a little gas can, which would end up, if I was exactly 50 feet off the property line, I put a gas can in there with my pickup truck with the plow and the sander on the back. It can be done, but I would be making 3-point turns for about 15 minutes every time I wanted to drop the plow and turn around. The other thing is, when delivery trucks come up the driveway now, we had a new new FedEx driver yesterday who didn't realize there was room at the top to turn around, which wouldn't be so if that building was brought forward. And he tried to back up the driveway And the driveway, even though it was plowed, it was a little bit slippery and he got stuck on the steep part of the hill. It is a steep driveway once you make the turn to come up. And, you know, he got stuck for a while. He did finally get out and he left the packages in the middle of the hill. So, you know, there was a lot of thought to put in. It really, it holds a lot more weight if you're here and if you picture a pickup truck, a delivery oil truck, and God forbid, an emergency vehicle. It's very difficult. It would make it, it would be, I would be creating a hardship for myself when actually it's not necessary. The only thing that I would be doing would be moving the building forward, and my neighbors would still basically get the same view, even if it was moved forward another 24, 25 feet. So for me to do that, it really seems like that's futile to, you know, put the building there, create a hardship on myself to prevent my neighbor from basically seeing the same view. So that's my point there. I hope that's understood.
Okay. All right, any other further discussion from the board?
Oh, only my,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay. When it's my turn.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, I'm still having a little trouble hearing you, sorry.
Yep.
So I'm gonna present these points. I have expressed no opinion on them. But I do need to bring them up. If Mr. and Mrs. Del Forno had applied for a building permit in advance of construction, would the ZEO have approved an alternate building site that would have not required a variance? Rotating the entrance to the garage, putting it in a different spot, I don't know. It's not my position to judge. Based on their criteria for trucks to be able to turn around, that's one question we need to answer. The actual variance distance, which is even a bigger issue to us, is in question. His measurement states 27 feet from the wall versus a measurement by the neighbor of 23.4. I don't think we had an official measurement of the variance. So how can we approve a variance when we don't know the distance? It's not a big amount of distance, but this is a contentious issue, and I think we should be extremely accurate. And I can go over these when everybody wants to talk about it. Number 3 is the planning board meeting on January 19th was unaware of the continued building effort after the stop work order was issued.
I'm sorry, that's not accurate. That's not true.
That's not true.
I have an email from our zoning enforcement officer that building was done after the stop work order.
That is
That's
not
not-
true. And
that's not
John Fenton was here. And when he gave me the stop work order, the only thing I said to John, I said, John, look, it's very windy up here. I says, can I have your approval to put up some 2x6 supports and some hurricane ties? I have an email to that effect from John saying that's fine. There was not one piece of lumber, one piece of plywood, nothing was done after the stop order was ordered. And I'm offended that someone has saying that it was.
I can show you the email. I'm not saying it. I am going by the email that I received from our ZEO dated.
Who's that?
Mr. Fenton is our ZEO.
Mm-hmm.
Dated January 23rd,
Mhm.
that the plywood walls were not there when he issued the stop work order.
Well,
And
that's just not true.
well, don't get in my face about it because
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit offended because there
Well,
was
you know
not
what?
one piece.
I can hang up right now.
Yeah, let's
Sorry, okay.
continue.
Back off, back off. I'm going through talking points. I'm not saying You lied. I'm not saying anything controversial. I'm
Understood.
bringing up points that could only benefit you if we get a correct answer from everybody.
Okay, understood.
And you could stop right now.
I have.
'Cause I put a lot of time in on this and I don't need this.
We have the ability to mute people at the
I-
meeting.
I'm probably going to mute myself in a minute.
You're doing fine, Norma. You're doing fine.
Okay, but I'm not saying he did or didn't do anything. All I am doing is going over the documentation I've received, which has taken me many hours of my time to put together in a cohesive manner, and I do not appreciate this treatment. In fact, give me a moment. I'm going to take a little break.
Sure.
I need 5 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Joseph, may I
Don't talk while I'm gone.
make a
Let's
comment?
have 5 minutes.
Or should we just,
Yeah, if it's something related to the,
Doesn't want any discussion right now, John.
I'm sorry?
She doesn't want any discussion when she's not here.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that she left. I thought she just was
She
sitting.
needs 5 minutes, she said.
Okay.
Anybody has to go in the bathroom? Go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
let's
get up
get
I
my.
was just gonna say, there's nothing wrong with a 5-minute break, if, you know. an hour.
Play you the
Bathroom
song now
break?
if you want me to.
Tea? We're 5 minute, Joe, we're 5 minute break.
yeah.
We still need to do that. We used to do that. We need 5 minute break.
Yeah. It's all
I'm
right.
back. Where do you think I went? I am going over
Yeah.
talking points. I am not making judgments on what anybody said or did. We will go over these step by step.
Sorry, Norma. Can we just wait for Charlie? Because we did a
Oh,
5 minute
he
break.
went too, okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna go in the bathroom too, so 5 minutes.
You started a trend, Norma.
I thought a thorough job of being bland here.
What? Yeah, that's cosmic comment. Sugar? Yes, you can. What?
I'm back if everybody else, maybe Russ isn't.
No, I'm here.
There,
Oh,
Russ?
you are, okay, your picture's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not there. That's okay. I just wanna stop, maybe back up and explain. Is everybody okay with this?
Yeah.
Explain to Mr. Del Forno that these talking points are an opportunity for him to address all the issues that are facing the zoning board. It's not, everything that's here has validity in one form or another. If you need to see the email that I got, I'll show it to you. It's fine. But I'm going to go through it. And you can be nice or you can't be nice.
I could be nice.
You probably ought to be, because I put a lot of time in on this. And you should be respectful of that. Okay? And I tried to put together a fair list of the issues with no opinions expressed. I didn't say you were right, you were wrong. I'm just, these are talking points. Okay? So I'm going to start over again. The first one is the question of whether, if you had applied for a building permit in advance of the construction, would the zoning enforcement officer approve an alternative building site? I'm not qualified to say there was one. I can't see you, by the way. And based on your criteria, that's just a question. It might be easily answered. Secondly, the actual variance distance is a question, because I've seen 3 different measurements, and we can't approve a variance based on a question mark of a number, especially when it's a little contentious. Okay. On number 3, the planning board meeting was unaware of the continued building per the ZEO's email to me. That was dated 1/23, which I would be very happy to provide you. That the plywood walls were added after the stop work order. I didn't say that. I have an email that the zoning enforcement officer did. I've got my numbers a little wrong here. Can the zoning board consider an application that has an additional violation, i.e. continued building after a stop work order? We also have to answer the question of whether all fees have been paid and if there were fines imposed for that. We don't know that. I didn't get the information. The next is the application states the current, these are kind of thoughts for if it moves forward that you may want to consider, but I'm going to mention them now. That the application states the current site will be similar to the house. House is white. Maybe you should consider a muted exterior, so it's not quite as visible in the setback. And it may even be a requirement for construction, because the planning board's neutral recommendation suggested that evergreens be put behind the building, but we would actually kind of need an arborist evaluation on whether trees can survive back there because of all the shade. Because of the orientation, I'm not an arborist, okay? But we've lost a lot of trees over here, pine trees, and actually spruce trees. And we had a lot more sun than that area might get. So why would you spend all that money when you could put a muted exterior on them, trying to be helpful, not
Makes sense.
critical?
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next item is the planning board's Neutral recommend, oh, no, that's the same thing. There's going to be some limitations on lighting around your building, which is typical for any accessory building, and you can't, you may even have to be, lighting may have to be almost non-existent since it's within the setback, if it moves forward. And it's standard that there's no exterior storage. But I just thought I'd throw that in. Now, I also put together a timeline, which I can go over if there's any questions about when the original complaint was made, when the work order was issued, and when I received the email from the ZEO explaining the order of events. I have that all here if anybody wants to hear it.
Yeah, does everyone have the email that Norma sent out, basically going over the talking points that she just mentioned? Okay. Further comments or discussion from the board on these points?
Yes,
Go ahead.
if I can take a minute.
Sure.
And this is not so much for the board, but for any of the neighbors who are listening. I would just like to make a couple of points. I hope I can be brief. The zoning board has no punitive ability in that if any rules were violated, it is not for us to make that determination. That would be a town matter. And it would become a violation, as Norma alluded to. That's not what we do. We're in a pretty crummy situation right now because we have a situation where someone didn't follow the letter of the law and finds himself in need of a variance to go forward. And I would just like to make the point to anyone in the audience that sometimes the law works in strange ways, and it may very well be to the advantage of anyone who finds this project objectionable that this has been triggered, because had the setback requirement not been necessary, the building could have still gone up without any significant review. And I'm not saying Mr. Del Forno would have done this, but it could have been taller, it could have been painted multicolors, it could have, any number of things could have happened that might be very objectionable and make the building stand out much further. Having stood on the road today and looked at the sight lines, it seems to me that if the building was in compliance in terms of the setback, it would still be very visible from the road. And my guess is, although I didn't go on the neighbor's property, it would still be very visible from the neighbor's property. Now, he finds himself in a situation where the zoning board can request accommodations and conditions. And I think reasonable people ought to be able to come up with something that will lessen the impact of this. And I think Ms. Dolan alluded to a few items that are very worthy of consideration. If the town chooses to do otherwise and instruct him to take the building down, that's all well and good. That's not what we do here. And I wanted to make that statement so that everyone understands what our process is and what our abilities are here this evening.
Thank you very much for that comment, John. Further comments from the the board? One of the things, Charles, I'd like you to speak to it if you feel so inclined, is the question of the trees in those areas or plantings.
Well, it's hard for me to tell. There's certainly, actually, the best candidate tree, both for coverage and for tolerating the shade, would be hemlocks, but they're all dying from the hemlock woolly adelgid, so we can hardly ask people to be planting hemlocks. There's some hope, I want to say, that we're starting to see hemlocks survive, but there are certainly species available. Arborvitaes do pretty well. They don't grow very quickly, but so there certainly are species, evergreens, that could be planted there that over time would help shield that location. The deer love arborvitae, and so getting them going and tall enough to survive is frankly, without fencing, you're just feeding the deer. So wrapping them with some light fencing or something to protect them. So, but again, as Norma said, you really need it. You'd want an arborist to get out there and look at the site. Get a sense of the soils. Arborvitae likes high pH soils, so you might even want to lime a little bit. So there are certainly options there that could be successful in being planted to help hide this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Charles. Any other comments from the board? Go ahead, Arthur.
I certainly don't have Charles's expertise, but long time growing trees around here. The deer love the hemlock too, so the whole fencing issue is a problem. I don't find them bothering white pine, which grow fairly fast. I don't find them bothering spruce, which grow fairly fast, and eventually blue spruce are quite slow growing around here, it seems. So, I mean, pines, if I planted them next to the garage, I'd want to take them down in 20 years. And the same with regular spruce, black spruce, whatever. In 40 years, I'd want to take them down. By which time the blue spruce are looking pretty nice. If usually in the past, the conditions for screening that the board has recommended haven't required an arborist. If we got to the point where we had to have an arborist, I would think that the variance would have to wait for a report from the arborist. I noticed on the way over to the property that the solar panels on the corner of Sunset and Horseshoe, which were required for screening, if I remember correctly, all the screening has died. And that's obviously an issue with maintaining our conditions when we give conditions. I'd like to address Norma's item number 1, which is if the building was placed on the property inside the setbacks, it could go right ahead, and it could be, so long as it was smaller than the house, it could be whatever he wanted to build. And we've had people in the past who have done crazy things to their property in order to annoy their neighbors, as well as doing things that we might find out of the norm. So what John brought up about what could be there if it wasn't in the setback is certainly true. I'll stop for the moment.
I'll make a few comments. I realize I'm the newest member on this board, may not be up to speed on everything, but I think John had a great point there. If they had built this 50 feet back from the property, it could have been higher. It could have been painted, any color you wanted. It would still be visible, I think, from the neighbor's property. I think the area where he put it is the appropriate area because of the fact that his house is on a plateau and is kind of level there. I also noted from watching the planning board meeting that one of the planning board members said that if this was brought to the planning board before any construction was presented and there was an application, that it was possible or even probable that they would have given a positive recommendation for a variance. So the crux of the matter here is that unfortunately, the gentleman went ahead without getting a variance, without getting a building permit and started it. That's the what sticks in our throats, I might say. But as John said, he could have built a higher building if he just came back 50 feet and got a permit, and it would have been maybe still a potential, I'll use the word, annoying eyesight for the neighboring property. So as far as the continued building, I heard Mr. DeForo say that that was not correct. I don't know. Norma says she's got an email from the CEO saying that the siding was not on it, so we have a contention here.
That was forwarded to the entire board, so you should have gotten it.
Well, I don't recall getting that. I looked at everything today because I was surprised at the additional things coming in.
Might be able to put it up on the screen, but I'm not sure I know how to do that.
You want me
Well,
to?
I'm not too good at
Do you want me to put it up?
computers either.
Arlene,
I
that,
can put it up.
that's dated January 23rd,
Yes.
and all I can do as a board member is go by the information that's given me.
Yeah, I'm not contesting that, Norma.
Okay, let's just pause until Arlene can put that up so that we take care of everything in a good order here. So you're gonna do that, Arlene?
I'm doing it. Hold on. I'm
Okay.
finding it.
I didn't know you were just smiling. And while she's getting that, I need to point out that although the email was dated January 23rd, he indicated that when he served the stop work order in the beginning of January, the plywood walls were not there. So there's a 10-day delay or more of when the stop work order was issued and the plywood walls appeared. So the date of the email is just in response to my question about the status of the whole situation.
Can you see it?
Yeah,
It was dated
Well, we can
January
see the-
23rd.
Only see the left side of it.
Addressed to the board. It was addressed to the board. He emailed all of you.
Yes, but we can only see it up to the word on the first line
Yep, hold on.
after, because to me, our pictures appear of, maybe it's my screen.
Yeah, I can see it. fine.
Okay, I'll minim, there we go. Sorry.
I don't know how to move our faces off of it either, so.
Just hit the minus sign at the top somewhere.
It's minimized
Okay,
all your screen.
good, I got it.
And I'm not saying this, I'm getting an answer to a question I asked. Shall I read it?
No,
Sure.
we're all-
Go ahead, Norma. Or do we have someone that can?
Norma could read it.
Yeah, go ahead, Norma. If you can see it.
A
clearly.
reply to my question. He says, hello, Norma. I can only comment on what I know. Last time I spoke with Mr. Del Forno was a couple of weeks ago. Now you have to understand that's 2 weeks before the 23rd. Okay. After I served him personally a stop work order, he asked if he could complete the roof and/or install plywood on the walls. I said that he could not continue to construct the structure and that the only work allowed was to install hurricane clips on the rafters to the ceiling joints to prevent the structure from collapsing. He then asked about protecting the wood framing from the weather. I suggested that he only install a tarp over the roof, properly securing the tarp to the frame. That was the only continued work allowed, and it was clearly communicated. The attached photo shows that there has been plywood installed to some sections of the walls that were not there, to the wall that was not present during my site visit. I believe that the neighbor called and complained about the continued work, and the building inspector, Mike Cazenza, who has not replied to me, just paid a visit to Mr. Del Forno this past week. Again, backing up the date, which is why I did the timeline, to the 23rd.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of things. Number one is, I don't know if John Fenton has this confused with something else, because as I said before, with all due respect, there was absolutely no continued plywood installation or anything on this building. The other thing is Mike Cazenza was I never saw Mike Cazenza. So,
He
I
went
mean,
there.
oh, he came here and didn't knock on
Yeah,
the door? Is
yeah.
that what
He
you're
didn't.
saying?
He just went to your driveway. He didn't talk to you.
Oh,
He just
okay,
looked at-
okay, understood. Okay, so then just my initial comment about, once that John Fenton was here and we walked around and we talked about different things, the part that's correct on there, that I did ask him, I actually asked him if I could put plywood on a roof. He said no, and I have not. I didn't install any other any work on that, no plywood on the walls. The walls are still open except for a few pieces of plywood that were there. Nothing has been put on the walls as far as plywood. The only thing that was installed was maybe 15 or 20 hurricane ties that he gave me permission to do. And the other thing, there was a couple of 2x6s, 20 feet long, that I crisscrossed on the inside just to keep the building stable. It seemed like it was very stable the way it was built, but only we do get some heavier winds up here than you actually do even get down in town. So that's the only further construction that was made since John Fenton left.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome, Joseph.
Further talking points there?
Well, I was discussing it, and I'm looking at talking point number 5, and the last question is, was there any fines imposed? I don't think, to my knowledge, that the building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer have the ability to assess fines.
Yes, they do.
They don't, doesn't have to go before the court?
No,
To
there
assess the
are
fines?
fines. Go through our zoning online and look up fines. They have the ability to impose fines.
Okay, because I had,
And we're not saying there should be a fine. All we have to do is in our, if we do a motion, we have to answer the question of whether all fees have been paid. And we are not aware of whether there's been fines imposed or not.
I'm not,
Arlene,
Oh,
Arlene,
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
charge him, there is a fee, Ross. There is a fee for building permit without, for construction without building permit, $400. I charge him that. Ed would tell you. I charge him that.
but
Yes,
am
that's
I
been
correct
paid.
in saying that fines have to be for a violation of it? It has to be brought before the town court, and the fine has to be assessed at that time. I
but
don't
we
believe,
don't know if it was or not, Russ. We
don't-
just need to answer to the question.
I just want to say that we have in our fee schedule that if you construct without a building permit, I charge you $400 on top of the fees
Right.
connected with the
Right.
construction.
So we need an answer to the question. We don't need to be judge and jury here. We just need an answer to the questions.
Okay.
not trying to be judge and jury here. Get off your judge hat.
I take offense at the way you're speaking to me, Norma.
Well, I'm
You know,
a little
we-
irritated because I put a lot of time in on this.
I realize you did. I realize you did because this is ongoing and there's a lot of problems with it. And I'm not taking away from that. I just said that I didn't think that a fine could be assessed unless the case was brought before the court. I have fined people in the past for zoning violations. Okay, I had it brought in and we had a trial. And when found guilty, I assessed a fine. And I thought that's the way it worked on it. I didn't know that you could assess. I can see a fee, but I can't see you assessing a fine. Maybe it's a matter of semantics. It's not important to me. So move on.
All right, Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it sounds to me like this is a regularly structured fee. And so, you know, yes, it's semantics, but it functions effectively as a fine. But if it's a fee, then it doesn't require the kind of procedure that Russ is describing. Is that, Arlene and Joseph, is that a fair summary of what's going on here?
Yeah, that's right.
Very good encapsulation there.
Okay. Further, let's see. Let's go with
Sorry, Ron.
Ron, go ahead.
Well, first of all, Norma, I want to say thank you. I know the considerable amount of time and effort you put into the entire case, and especially the talking points and the details. So I appreciate that for helping to make it much clearer for me to wrap my head around. So thank you for that. To that, and your point number 2 there with the variance distance, is it in our purview, or could we or would we request a survey before we move forward?
Just as a comment to that, we certainly could. However, we could just say, like, for example, if we have the closest measurement was 23 feet, we can just say we're granting a 27-foot variance rather than, having to go through that. Because again, in actuality, whether it's 24 feet or 27 feet, I don't think if the board is planning on granting it, that would be a sticking point. If it is, then we could discuss it, but we can just kind of go with the larger measurement that we.
Well, I hear you, Joseph, and I understand you, but this is in my head, and I could be wrong, but I feel that, this is a contentious issue for not only the board, but for the parties that are with us tonight. And probably the most troubling outcome of all this is it probably ruined what appears to me to have been a neighborly relationship. We're probably talking about inches here, but I'd like to know, considering the circumstances, I'd like to know exactly what we're talking about. Is it a foot or is it 3 feet? Because even in visiting the site today, Mr. Del Forno didn't have a definitive answer as to where the line was.
If I may cut in.
So go ahead, Mr. Del Forno.
So why don't we just make it to the like I said to you today, Ron, the stone wall itself is supposed to be the marker, but the stone wall is about 3 feet, and there is a survey marker on a tree that's on the other side of the stone wall by about another couple of feet. Why don't we just make the request the extended one and go from there? It would be another 3-point-something feet, and instead of making it, I don't even know the numbers what it was. Just add it to the. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
Something we could certainly consider, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Charles?
Yeah, I really appreciate the work Norma put into this, because there are a lot of issues here. I keep coming up against a couple that are sort of in some ways simpler. And the way John did, I want to make a couple of comments about input from neighbors. So, this is not a process in which we ask the neighbors to vote, right? So, but we do take the opinions and concerns of neighbors into account. One of the primary things we have to address in granting a variance is whether there will be a change in the character of the neighborhood. And so, you know, we take, I think, very seriously what we get here from neighbors. But there have been many cases in the past where we had neighbors who really didn't want to see the variance granted because it would change what they had previously used on the property or were used to, and yet the variance request itself was reasonable under the rules for granting a variance, which was that you know, it did not really qualitatively change the character of the neighborhood or cause a deterioration in environmental conditions, and in particular that the benefits sought by the applicant could not be achieved by other means. And that's unfortunately where I keep getting hung up here. It's that I look at, you know, I come back to my numbers. You know, right now this thing appears to be 72 feet from the house. If it was not in the setback, it would be 49 feet from the house. Now, I guess what I'm hearing is that Mr. Del Forno wants to be able to use that driveway as a circular so that he doesn't have to do a 3-point turn. Is that a sufficient justification for pushing into the side yard setback? And that to me is the question we have to address. You know, is that such a burden that this is you know, a compelling argument for an easement or for a variance? That's what's, and with, you know, I really sincerely appreciate the concerns of the neighbors, but I'm more hung up on, we in principle do not grant variances if the applicant has a way to achieve their benefit without granting the variance. And so that's the issue that I would love to hear. I'm not convinced that a 3-point turn is that difficult in 49 feet.
May I respond?
Sure, go ahead.
So it's not a fact. It's impossible to turn. The way the slope of the driveway comes down, there's a hill on the side. Even with no building there, when I come in with either my car or my SUV, often I can't really get a swing to go into my current 2-car garage. But I'm not looking to make a circular drive. Now, here's my point. If I have the space and request a variance, the significance of, you know, it would create, moving it forward would create a hardship for myself, and it would be significant. And the only thing by not doing it, the building right now where it sits, there's a huge, on the neighboring property, there's a huge amount of maple trees that right now, of course, they don't have leaves on them. A couple of the board members were here. John Caligaro was here. Russ Tompkins was here. Ron, Mr. Weiland. When you stand in the back of that building, some of them thought that the studio was what was in question. The home of the people that are against this, you can barely see their house through the woods now, and you'll never see it during the time when the leaves are on the trees, which is about 6-7 months.
What they have has nothing to do with the issue that you're facing.
I'm sorry, Norma,
What
repeat
they
that, please.
have or don't have has
Okay.
nothing to do with the issue that's on the table.
Understood. Okay. I just wanted to make that point clarified. Understood.
And I appreciate your point.
Okay.
I just wouldn't belabor it because it has nothing to do with what you have or haven't done.
Okay.
At this point, with what's on the table. And I have to mention that we can't do anything until we resolve whether there was continued building after the stop work order was done, because we cannot hear you or make a decision if you're in violation. And according to that email that I received, until you straighten it out, not me, you are in violation of violating a stop work order.
So
Not just the no building permit. This is, you need to resolve that.
Norma, how do I go about doing that? You know,
I would get a hold of Mr. Fenton and
okay.
get documentation. I'm not saying you were right or wrong. All I'm saying is that's the information I got from him.
So, okay, understood, Norma. Very much appreciated. So should I assume then we're done for tonight or not?
No,
Not necessarily.
Okay.
We can settle a whole bunch of affairs.
Okay.
It won't have to settle later. But as far as I'm concerned, and the board can override me, we cannot make a final decision tonight if you're in violation. And according to that email, you are in violation. I didn't decide it. I just read it.
Can you send us a copy of that letter, Norma?
I sent it to everybody.
Us?
No, to them, to the
Oh,
applicant.
wait,
No, it's, that should come from you, Arlene, if we're.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arlene, just send a copy of that.
You
I mean,
have,
I can do it again. I'm just, no
Oh,
problem.
no, it's okay, Norma, thank you.
Okay.
you might have to foil it, Ed.
Say that again?
You
What-
might have to foil, freedom of foil.
Just request it from,
Oh, I understand. Okay, well, I'll take care of that tomorrow.
Can I just say something, Norman?
yeah, go ahead, Arlene.
Sure, no.
So when he built the garage without a permit, that's a violation. Right there, he's in a violation. So, I mean, I thought granting the variance will correct the violation. So you're saying we cannot, technically, if he still continued the thing, but right now he's already in violation.
That's a good point.
Okay. He violated for building without a permit. But then he had a further, as far as I know, unless I read the laws wrong, a further violation by continuing to build, according to the email I received, by violating the stop work order, which was the stop work order for building without a permit. So we've got two here.
Okay,
And please correct me if I'm wrong.
that's a good point, Norma. We can certainly, look into that. We have several items that we're holding out on
Well,
here.
yeah, it got confusing.
Yeah, for sure. Charles?
Yeah, I would like to ask other members of the board whether they, how they respond to my question about whether 72 feet is necessary versus the 49 feet. If because fundamentally with all of this other stuff, yes, it is is relevant, but if I can't be convinced that there is no other way to achieve the benefit that the applicants need without granting the variance, if I think it's not enough simply that this is the ideal place or the most convenient place, it has to be necessary to achieve the benefit you seek. And so I've heard Mr. Del Fornos say that. I just wonder whether the others who have looked at it, I was not personally, it wasn't obvious to me that it needed to be another 23 feet away from the house.
Okay, Ron?
Well, I guess I'll say first that, what has led us here, and the chronology or the timeline, is unfortunate, and it upsets me that we're here. That said, I will say that, having been there and knowing the property to some degree, I drove up the driveway. I have a four-wheel drive vehicle. Was fairly confident that I could make it. When I got up to the top, it's tight in terms of where each, the house and the garage
Thank you, Ron.
is now. My concern is not for the Del Fornos, whether they have to make a 3-point turn or a 33-point turn. My concern would be emergency response vehicles, whatnot, protecting life and property down. It's pulling that building up 23 feet, to me is impractical. And that's kind of what we're stuck with at this point.
Thank you. That helps, Ron. I appreciate it.
I'll comment on that too. I mean, I didn't pace off the distance. I just paced off the distance behind the building to the stone wall. But I have been a member of both fire companies in the town of Clinton, East Clinton and West Clinton. And in that capacity, I have driven the fire engines, which are large vehicles. And I do have a concern going up that hill, if you were up there with a fire truck, of the ability to maneuver it around. So like I said, I can't say that it wouldn't be possible because I didn't measure it off when I was up there. But there's not going to be any circular drive. I pulled in front of the new building that he started with my vehicle, and he had his two vehicles in front of his garage. And like I say, with a large emergency vehicle, I could see that it would be a factor to be considered up there.
I mean, there's certainly lots of driveways in town where an emergency vehicle has no choice but to back up, right? People just don't, they don't have the room at the head of their drive. But my sense is that the issue here is that this driveway is long, steep, and windy. And that trying to back a fire engine down that would be different than my 100-foot long straight driveway in which even I can't do a 3-point turn, right?
You couldn't back the truck up that. The trucks usually have what they call drop chains, and they're in front of the tires, so that you're going forward, those chains are coming down and swinging into your tread. If you were backing up, I don't believe would work. And I think it would be impossibility for a fire truck to back up that hill, especially if you had any kind of precipitation on it.
Well, no, that's why I asked, because you guys have a lot more experience with this sort of stuff. And, my little Subaru would probably make it up and down that hill and would turn around without any trouble. But that's not, I needed to hear from other members of the board. So anybody else?
Here's the terrain of the property, just in case. 600, it rise.
Okay, you're looking at the property north, south, east, west. If you look to the east, the land doesn't rise that fast. I was up there. If he had gone for a building permit, he would have run into having to consider variance into the side yard. If that land to the south and east is plenty of room to put a garage. I know there's a bit of a hillside, but it's not that dramatic. It's just we're at the wrong stage here, and I just don't see that it's it would be remarkable. The planning board, if it had gotten an application for a 10-foot variance because he had realized that the variance was needed, or a 20-foot or whatever, the planning board could have considered the variance in an appropriate context. And the planning board might also have seen that there's other, as Charlie is bringing up, this is not the only possible location on the property for a garage. You turn it 90 degrees and you have that whole area that's open to be used to turn.
For any other comments from the board members? Okay, Mr. Delforno, did you have a comment? You're muted if you're speaking. You're muted, Mr. Delforno.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I believe it was Charles that was just speaking.
Art.
And
Arthur, that was
I was questioning the other area that he said to position. I think he did turn it. The problem that I have in that area is, number one, I have a backhoe. I know there's only about 12 inches of soil there, and then I hit rock, and it's not just shale, it's rock. The other thing is, if I did carve into there and put the slab there, as you can see in the topographical map, it goes up a hill there, and the water runs off significantly off of that hill. And the other thing is, there are several huge pine trees, probably 125, 135 feet tall. They do fall over. One fell over 2 weeks ago. One fell over, hit my propane tank a couple of months ago. And for me to have, I had one taken down about 2-3 weeks ago. It cost me $700, and the guy quoted me $3,200 to take the other trees down. So it's not recommended, and it's not feasible.
Okay. This goes back to talking point one, not making judgment, just bringing it back to that. If you had applied for a building permit in advance of the construction, all of those factors would have been taken under consideration, and you would not have the difficulty you're having right now.
Understood.
okay. Ron?
Question, Mr. Delforno, is the
Yes.
building the way it stands now, Is that slab a slab on grade?
It has 5 inches of compacted crushed stone, and it has 6 inches of poured concrete on grade. So does that answer your question?
It does, which leads me to another question, which is in the other areas where you allege that you would hit shale, I guess my question is, why does that matter? If the current building is slab on grade, the other location would be slab on grade as well.
Well, the answer is because it's a level area in the plateau area right now. But if I put the slab in the back of the garage, goes up the hill, I know for a fact from living here, that water, when it rains hard, it would pour down against the back of that garage and eventually it would wash out the slab in the bottom. Besides the fact that those tall pines are very much in danger on the right-hand side of your screen right now. Those tall pines fall over like toothpicks and it does get very windy up here.
Okay, thank you.
Joseph,
Yes.
another thing too is because it was already up the building, there is no way that the building will be able to inspect the foundation, the framing, the periodic inspection of that building.
Well,
May I respond?
but just as a comment with that would be up to the building inspector and however they choose. Like if for example, we said as the zoning board, we're okay with the location, but the building inspector says, no, tear it all down or do, I mean, however that works, that would be, kind of up to them to decide. Any other comments from the board about this or the talking points? Or Charles, did you have any further question about your point, which was a very valid point?
Well, for instance, our zoning law allows driveways to be within the setback, right? In fact, I think it's 8 feet, right? You can't park a car within 8 feet of the side lot, I believe is the number. If that's a fairly wide flat area, certainly having some area alongside the building where a vehicle could pull in to do a 3-point turn. You're not going to get a fire engine is not going to do, that's not a circular drive for a fire engine. They're going to have to do a certain number of point turns. And so I guess I'm still not entirely convinced that you could not turn around. You wouldn't, the question is, does that structure entirely block any ability for something to pull up alongside of it and then turn around in your driveway? It's just, I've never driven a fire engine or a rescue wagon or even anything bigger than a pickup truck. So I'm not familiar with how much it takes.
Well, therein lies the problem. It was never reviewed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never, and he can be made to move it. So, but it's not for us to say. It's, we would have to pass that off to, I believe, to someone else. And what we're struggling with here is I'm sure is we'd really rather not do that. But there's issues here.
I mean, I guess my take on this is that the steepness of the driveway getting up there is indeed a factor, right? It's something to take into consideration. Because unlike a lot of driveways where a vehicle can't turn around, backing down that thing with an emergency vehicle just does not seem feasible. So there has to be some way at the end of this driveway for an emergency vehicle to turn around to get back down.
Well, they certainly get back up on all that rock. I mean, it's even though there's a grade there, they're not going to sink in.
Yeah, and that's what I would have hoped that the planning board, if this were done properly, they would have
evaluated.
That's what would have been resolved. In other words, they would have said, yes, we agree that this has to be pushed into the setback in order to provide the safety that all town residents expect on their property. Or, geez, yeah, sure, it'd probably be easier for everybody if you put it in the setback, it's not necessary. And so that's not a kind of judgment that we typically try to make here. That's fundamentally a planning board decision, and this got short-circuited. So to me, that's what leaves us in this difficult situation, not the least that we have neighbors who are upset. and who have been waiting very patiently, I might add, listening to all this for a long time.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm done. Yeah, thank you, John or Joseph.
You know, the issue of screening with trees came up, also mentioned in here, and one of the points which I thought was a good thing was number 4, application states current site will be similar to the house. The house is white. Should muted exterior be a condition for existing construction if approved? I mean, these are factors that I think should be considered. The white stands out like an old sore thumb. A muted green would probably be much less noticeable. I know I have a piece of property in Catskill and I painted the tool shed green, and it does, you don't even notice it's out there, you know? But I'm wondering if we should seek the input of the 2 neighbors to see if what their feeling is on these 2 conditions of screening and maybe a muted color, to see if there's any way that we can resolve this issue so that everybody's a little more pleased. I don't know. Like I say, I don't know if that's a thought process or not.
Charles, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, no, Russ, I think that's a very wise suggestion. I guess it would mean that we would need to open a public hearing so that they can in fact speak.
Yeah, so just, yeah, and thank you. So what I'm hearing, I have kind of in general 4 comments, and I just want to make sure that I'm kind of getting a sense for the board. So the items that I've been hearing as we've spoken through this are, 1, an evaluation by someone that could provide some good insight about the feasibility of an emergency vehicle going up there. You know, if they indeed can, you know, if the current location is good, or if they say, you know, listen, if it was moved over 23 feet, everything would be fine, you know, no issue. The second was having a survey showing exactly the location with the setback. The third is, you know, is there a second violation from the zoning enforcement officer, or is he okay with what's done? You know, just to kind of get his take and comment on that. And then the 4th, screening, you know, the viability of screening or screening plan from an arborist, and or that ties into the color. Are there any other points that I'm missing that, you know, kind of came up in discussion that are still more or less an open issue? Arthur?
If it hadn't been in the setback, the planning board wouldn't be involved.
Correct.
No variance would have been needed probably, unless something else is going on. If you're talking about the building having to be moved, then, you know, you're not gonna, I don't know that you're gonna drag that slab forward 10 or 20 feet. You're going to be putting another slab somewhere else if that location is not appropriate.
Any other comment? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. Now's the opportunity to hear comments from the public. Again, if you would state your name and your address as you begin.
Unmute, Nancy. Gotta unmute. We can't hear you.
You know, I'm trying to
You
figure
gotta
it out.
unmute.
There we go.
How's that?
There we go. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, can you see us both?
We can see you as well.
Okay, I'm Rudy, and this is Nancy, and we're at 157 Schultzville Road. And obviously, we're here because we're the next door neighbors. And I'm trying to think, as I'm listening to all this, how can I put this in a really simple way? And I can say this falls into 2 parts for me. And one has to do with the principle and the rules, and the second part has to do with the solution. And I heard Ed say tonight that he thought about everything. He considered all these things that you guys were discussing, and he came up with this placement as a result of his thoughts. Well, he never said that he thought about getting a building permit where these things would be considered more objectively. he did it completely on his own and made his own determination. Now, that said, when we saw the building going up, we didn't know a slab was poured at the time because it was low to the ground. We saw a wall going up on December 30th at about 10 o'clock in the morning. We're sitting in our dining room. And immediately I said, something's going wrong here. And I texted Ed, and in my text, I said to him, I said, which I have right here, I didn't submit it. I said, I see you're putting up a structure. Is it 50 feet from the property line? Question mark. Doesn't look like it. I recall the town had me build 50 feet from the property line. And I should, on that note, I'm letting him know there's a 50-foot rule, and I'm letting him know, and I'm letting everyone else know here that I have applied, Nancy and I applied for both our structures in addition to our house and the studio. We applied, put a site plan in. We were told of the 50-foot rule. We made sure that we kept within that 50-foot rule. We live by those rules, and considering our neighbors and considering what we're obligated to under the town ordinances. So that's the part that's very concerning to me in this whole discussion. Now, part B has to do with the solution. Everything that Ed said and some of the things that some of the members have said, I disagree with. I do believe there is a solution where you can move the house, move the garage and still get your positioning for emergency vehicles and make it all work. And no one has discussed, looking at my photograph, I don't know whether that could be posted. It was, you just looked at it a moment ago. The rear. Yeah, the photograph shows the back of the property.
Okay, 1 minute. Hold on.
And I'll make a few comments on that.
Which one you want to talk about?
No, that was the one that was taken when the building was going up, when we first noticed it. You have to go.
December 30th.
Yeah, December 30th. And then you have to go a little further into after it was constructed, and then it's shot from the back.
But she sent it to me.
It's only 4 photographs, so it's the
Yeah,
third
no,
one.
I know, but I can't run it like at once. Sorry.
Well, I waited this long. What's a couple more minutes?
This one?
No, one more to go.
This one?
Okay, yeah, that's good. Thank you. All right, what we're looking at here, because I heard this story about the incline problem, and I went back and I photographed, and as you can see, for 50, 60, I don't know how far footage back, further back, it is relatively flat terrain. And you could easily have moved the building there. You would actually, by doing that, you would have opened up the space for emergency vehicles.
May I comment?
No, not right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My turn right now, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Okay, that, I'll repeat myself. That building, and had Ed, and I told him this when he called me right after I texted him. I said, why didn't you discuss this with me when you were putting it up? just to let me know what you were doing as a good neighbor. And he said, oh, I thought you wouldn't mind. I thought you would turn the other eye and let me have it there. And I said, well, you know that there's a rule, town rule about doing that. He said, yes, he knows about the town rule, but he wasn't going to get a permit. And that's what he told, Nancy was here with me, and he tells me this.
On December 30th.
And I can't believe he's telling me stuff, knowing all this, and he's putting the building up at that time. But anyway, moving forward to the photograph here, I'm saying you can move the building back. He even actually he just said a moment ago, he cut that tree down. You can see it in the photograph. You can move it back and it opens up the space. And that tree is at the 50-foot mark from the rock wall. There's room to move it back there. And you could do it. I poured a slab on the same soil he poured a slab on from my studio, and it worked perfectly fine. Didn't get washed out. Nothing like that happened. So that's not, a concern. And as far as putting in trees there, I hired Adams. 2 years, they tried to put in evergreen trees over by my studio to get some screening on that side of my studio. And they dug the stuff out. The soil is very clay there, and the trees died each time. Very difficult soil to work with. And so that's a consideration. If you're putting up trees, there's a chance they're not going to make it. So that's another concern. And as far as getting up the driveway, that steep incline, yes, it's true. It's windy. You have to work your way up. But, let's face it, an emergency vehicle is going to have to go up there. There's no straight road up to his house. But when you get to the top of the hill, it all levels off for a long space, including the front yard, which is level. You can back into the front yard. Emergency vehicle, if they have to, they'll back in and turn around there. There's so many options that are possible, and they have never been explored by anyone in consideration of where this building should go. And this is what should have been done in the first place and never was done. This is why we're very, very upset.
You see it. You do.
And of the visual thing we've already said, as an eyesore, we all know that.
No, but
And we see it. It's very close to our land and our property values. And there's no reason why it ever had to be that close. Never a reason for that. So all these things, you add them all up, and something's really wrong with this picture.
Okay.
After we notified.
Any other comments there?
And I'd also like to say that I'm very disturbed that, after we spoke with him on December 30th and told him that that he didn't respect the 50-foot setback rule, he continued to build his building.
He said to me, what do you want me to do, Rudy? And I said, well, move the building. He said, I'm not going to move it. I got like $1,800 or whatever in a slab. I'm not going to put another 1,800, I think that was the number, into a slab just to move it over. I'm not going to do that. So he's telling me he's not going to do it. And he hasn't gotten a building permit, and he's telling me this. I mean, that's really audacious.
Okay. Again, all of the comments are made to the board. Any other comments that you have? Okay. Further discussion from the board. Norma, do you have any comments?
No, I presented my talking points. I agree with your list, Joseph, about emergency vehicles, the survey, the violation, the issue of continued building, screening. What we can't ever get past is whether there was an alternative building site in someone else's opinion, without making you move it. I mean, which can be done, but so those are all the things that are on the table. Okay,
great. So Mr. Del Forno, I saw you had a comment. You wanted to make a comment to the board earlier. Is that still the case? You have to unmute yourself if so.
my problem is I can't see anybody right now because the picture's up here. So
Oh yeah, can you take that down, Arlene?
Okay, can you hear me now?
now I can't, well, because I thought I was invisible. Anyway.
Sure, go ahead. Just again, any comments that you have are directed towards the board.
Yes, I just wanted to put it in a nutshell and just say that I disagree with 90% of what Rudy said.
Okay, all right. So
Including the talking points?
No. I'm sorry. I said I disagree with what Rudy, my neighbor, said. I disagree with 90% of what he said.
Okay.
Charles,
Can I step in real quickly?
I
just hold on one
expressed a lot of opinions on that and I did not.
Yeah. Yeah, just we'll give you 1 second here. Just hold on, Charles.
Well, I was just going to say, this gets back to your 4 points. I would propose that we take the screening and the trees off the table as just unnecessarily complicated. We have never been, I don't think we've ever been satisfied, even when we put this in as a condition, that it's feasible, enforceable, or permanent. And, I study trees for a living, and even I wouldn't know what to put there with any guarantee that they would still be there and work and functioning in 10 years. So I think there are enough complications here. I would be quite happy to see the screening issue taken off the table. I think we're making this much harder for us than we need. That's just a suggestion.
I just want to respond to that, not irrelevant to this. Normally, the planning board, the way they address the arborist screening issue is we will have like an escrow for the town engineer to monitor the trees. Like we did that one time over Crimson Hill, where the trees died, they clear cut. We asked them to replant everything and then, to keep monitoring, and there's money at the town engineer checking.
Not happening.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways we've tried to do it, but I've never
I'm
been
just saying that's how we
confident
do
that
it.
it really worked.
Well, we can, again, just to, is that an important point for the board members in light of what Charles commented on?
I agree with Charles. It's difficult to enforce, and over time, it's not been successful. I think making the building not match the house, which is white, making it sort of invisible is more in order, but moving it's also an option.
Sure.
So
Yeah, definitely.
I think it should either be invisible or moved.
Okay, I mean, we could, to your point, Norma, talk about the color there versus, if we wanted to, insist on an arborist recommendation for the trees. If we're saying that likely is not going to be the case, then that would be, a color question. Okay.
I know it. Ron would be more an expert on exterior coatings that would work.
Sure.
I know the answer to that.
Okay.
Can I make a statement?
Yep. Go ahead.
I just to sum it up, I think this boils down to solving a problem, and that requires a site evaluation. And there's a number of things involved with it, obviously, because we discussed it tonight. And I think it's easier to make a determination when you find out what your real possibilities are.
Sure, and that goes to the point of, the number one, which was the evaluation for emergency vehicles and the survey to take a look at that to see where the setbacks are and/or other options and possibilities. So certainly those are things that we're considering.
I think that emergency vehicle evaluations excellent. Should have been one of the talking points. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. All right, were there any other comments that you had? All right, so what I'm proposing at this point that we do is to provide the applicant with an opportunity to provide us additional information as requested. And again, I'm speaking to the board members here to get your feelings and insight on this. And that is, again, reviewing these. One, an evaluation from John, did you have a comment? So evaluation for someone that is involved with the emergency vehicles, whether that's the one of the people that handle, from the fire department, whomever, but an evaluation.
Someone of our selection, not like.
Okay, so
Okay.
we can make that recommendation, but someone for evaluating the feasibility of emergency vehicles just to see what space would be required for that. The second being a survey showing the locations as they are precisely laid out.
In scale, yeah.
Yeah, a survey map. And then 3, a letter from in regards to whether or not there is indeed a second violation, or if that is a non-issue, but just confirmation from the zoning enforcement officer, that piece being resolved.
Can I add one thing to that? I think
You can certainly add your comments.
as part of the evaluation, I think this is obviously going to be done very objectively because of the conflict of interest if the homeowner does it, to see if there's another location for the building that would work with, as you say, the emergency vehicles or whatever. So that the way that a recommendation can be made.
Yeah, and
those lines as well.
Right. And that's an evaluation again. Once we receive the information from the experts in these particular fields, then as the zoning board, that's kind of our job to take a look at it to say, okay, based upon this information, yes, we feel like this location is indeed the best, or no, we feel, again, based upon this, if it was moved back 20 feet and over 30, then, we feel like everything's feasible and possible. And so in that case, again, that's up to the zoning board to decide whether or not, again, based upon the information, whether or not the location is good or needs to be relocated.
Would we be, both parties be notified when these evaluations take place?
No, not the evaluations, but certainly once we receive all the information, that will be, as soon as the applicant gets that, we'll leave the public hearing open. So if the applicant is able to get all this information at the next meeting, then it would be at the next meeting or the following meeting. So once we have the information, you would be able to attend the meeting where the information is discussed.
I have a question, Joseph. Suppose the CEO said, yes, there's a second violation for continuance. So what does it mean? Does it mean?
So it would just need to be resolved. So like you could say there was a violation, but we worked it out, it's fine. Or if there's some violation that they have to go to the town court about, it just needs to be resolved.
How do you resolve the second violation?
So you would just get a letter from the CEO saying,
yeah, and then how do you move forward from there? Do we go to court? I mean,
just pay a fine.
Yeah, that's going to be up to the CEO. The CEO may say, it was my mistake, it's okay. Or he could say, listen, I've spoken to them, they installed 4 pieces of plywood, I'm still okay with that. They haven't proceeded any further, so it's all fine. Just as long as he's okay with it, we're good with it.
But the owner needs to get that confirmation and share it with us.
Right, it'll need to be submitted to Arlene, who will then pass that along to us. Ron, do you have a comment?
So,
question actually, Joseph, thank you. If we do move forward with these requests, one of which being the survey, the question of the grade specific to the areas in question, would we need elevations, or is the topographical map as it stands now sufficient?
I mean, I guess we could look to the board for that information. Is there?
That will show on the survey. The survey will indicate the elevation.
The survey could or could not.
The survey doesn't necessarily have to, but you might have to ask for it as additional information.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Del Forno.
Yes, and what is the purpose of the survey?
So the purpose of the survey would do 2 things. One, it would let us know exactly what the setbacks are. So we could use that as a reference to go from, and one, deciding.
Well, I thought we agreed earlier, or we commented on earlier that, the discrepancy was only like 3 feet or so. And that was not a huge difference to, so just go with the more extravagant figure, make it 20, so whatever it was. And that wasn't what I heard earlier.
True, that is an option.
Mhm. I would rather do that.
Right, but hold on one second. There's
Okay.
more to it than that. It is an option, however, but Arthur, go ahead, your comment.
I think it's an option we use in the majority of cases. Is to give the largest amount necessary, and if that isn't really needed, it's still covered. We often add a foot or 2 or 3 to make
Yes.
sure that it's.
Okay, Ron?
I think it would also help or assist us in determining the actual distance between the existing home and the new structure, and also assist the whoever it may be, if it's the fire chief coming up there, and it'll help us down the road when we revisit this as well. I think it'll be time and money well spent.
Okay, Charles?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we want to do whatever we can to be objective and careful about this without creating undue expenses. And so, for instance, I'm not sure a full service, we don't need to know where the back property line is or the north property line. We would like to sort of know where the property line in question is. As Arthur says, we've often been quite willing to just be a little generous, since usually a couple of feet are not the issue. And if we think it's 23 feet we think it's 27 feet, as a variance, to 30 feet sufficient to ensure that the building is not in violation. But this is contentious enough. I'm not in favor of imposing unnecessary expenses on the applicants, but in this case, I would certainly like to know at least where that line is. And as Ron points out, exactly how far then, the building is from the house. But whether or not a full survey is necessary is the point I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I would
Just a
agree.
quick question.
I would agree with that. Hold on one moment. So again, just to recap for the board, just to get the comment, and that would be the marking, knowing where the property line is, the distance from the property line to the existing building and to the house, so that gives us the parameters to know where that could be. And then that would be taken into consideration once once we have the experts take a look at those particular areas.
Can I speak?
Okay, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, all right, so as I understand it, we're talking about a site evaluation, and there might be a topographical map involved with elevation view. But I assume there is a professional person that comes out, walks the property. I know I'm trying to simplify this, and says, yeah, the slope is too much, or the slope is, you can put a slab there, it's fine. In other words, give an opinion of the actual lay of the land, considering everything around it.
So to answer that question, I think the short answer is probably no, meaning you'll have a surveyor that would just mark out those specific things, and then you would have us as the board that would take a look at it. And then if it's the fire chief going there to take a look at it, he would say, I can back up there, or no, I can't, it's too steep, just along those lines. So those would be the people that would be involved in making that decision.
Well, the fire chief, he's going to look at that structure there that's existing now and say, I can't back up, or I can back up. Or he could say, if that was moved over a little bit, I've got room for my truck to come up there. And then you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those kind of variations.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're waiting to hear.
Okay.
I'd like to say something. Isn't it important, though, to really have someone to look at the other possible sites that will comply with the 50-foot setback?
Charles, go ahead.
And who's that person going to be?
speak to that.
Fundamentally, it's up to the board to make that judgment based on the information we have. And so that's why we do site visits. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're charged with doing. But in this case, I don't drive a fire truck, so I really would like to have some added information about that, right? So that I feel like I can make an informed decision. So, but fundamentally, that's the zoning board's judgment. And on many of these issues, it's the planning board makes the recommendation, and that's why we have people go through the planning board first, because they tend to have more expertise in many of these areas than we do.
I'd like to say something. I'd like to speak.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I have to be very frank. I find it a little bit difficult to understand the drama associated with this structure coming from the two neighbors.
So again, I want to stop you to say the comments need to be related to the case and then directed to the board. So if the information is relevant to this and it's comments to the board, then we're happy to hear it. If it's about relationships with the neighbors, this isn't the proper venue.
Now, what I have to say is they seem very concerned about where in that one level area the structure would exist. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of this. They were disrespectful by calling the structure an eyesore. You know what? Let it go. You know, just let it go. Let it go. This is going to deaf ears.
Relevant to the actions that we're taking.
Right.
We're trying to keep it focused.
Okay. Were there other comments that we had? Again, so I have 3 points that we're looking for clarification on. Again, one, evaluation for professional for the emergency vehicles, for example, the fire chief, a survey map showing where the property line is, where the current house is, and the current location of the building in relation to that. And the clarification with the.
May I make a quick comment, Joseph? So, I mean, we know within a couple of feet that the survey line is the stone wall. With a tape measure, you can measure from the stone wall to my attached garage. From the attached garage, you can measure back. Why is it necessary to get it exactly within 6-8 inches or whatever? It seems like an unnecessary task and an unnecessary expense, unless my neighbor has a survey that, and there are surveys, there's blue markers surveyed on the trees for when the 50 acres that was attached to this property was surveyed off 10 years ago. Those markers are still there. And that's the markers that I took the 100-foot tape and went off of.
Okay, so,
Excuse me, a quick response to that. All we care about is the 50-foot rule. That we all have to.
Okay, so what I want to, again, come back to is what you choose to do or what you don't choose to do, that's entirely up to you. We're just making recommendations. Like, so,
Gotcha.
So when we're talking in the board, we're saying this is the information that we feel would be helpful for us to make this determination. Whether you choose to provide us with that information or not, that's entirely up to you. We're just saying, you know, again, this is kind of getting a feel for the board members to say what will help you make an informed decision. And again, I'm just compiling a list from what I've heard from the board members, and they're saying, this is what I feel would be helpful. Again, when it comes time for voting, if we have the information, it's, you know, it is typically more helpful to provide clarity for us.
And is it possible to have the board make a decision without a survey and, you know, have the trucks come up, the fire truck come up and, you know, because I'm just at the point where why would I want to get a survey, even if I'm only surveying that one side where I know where the stone wall is within a couple of feet. To me, it's just money thrown out the window where I don't even know in the end if this thing is going to go through.
Okay.
Could
With all
I
due
make a
respect,
comment?
yeah.
Joseph, when you,
Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm understanding you're right, but there's been a couple of comments. Earlier, you made a comment. I believe Charles made a comment regarding the distance. Now, we know it's less than 50 without a problem. Whether it's, the neighbor said it's, I think, 23 feet, 4 inches. This neighbor said, I think, 27. There is a stone wall back there. I walked back and saw the stone wall. I would assume he has a survey map of his property. I don't know anybody that doesn't. I have a survey map of my property. He bought it. I would think that map would be sufficient. And again, I don't think the concern over a foot more or less, or even a 3 foot more or less is the main issue. It's less
Thank you,
than a
Russ.
foot. And I don't think that we need to have another survey done. I think the survey map that's present there, and they show a stone wall, we say, okay, that's the stone wall. Now, granted, the stone wall is falling down, so maybe instead of being 2 foot wide, it's 3 or 4 foot wide. But you're relatively know that it's between 23 feet and 27 feet. So
Thank you, Russ.
I don't see the need. You don't have to say thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm saying that I don't see any need for a survey. And again, you get the stone wall, you can measure it off with a tape to the house and to whatever other points you need there. So I don't know if I'm following you. Did you actually want a surveyor to come in?
I think if we're granting a variance for something that was built without a building permit, that if we held it to the letter of the law is not unreasonable. Okay? Especially when it's contentious. So I guess I could go either way on this, but I don't think it hurts. Well, let's get the answer from the emergency vehicles first. And we need, the problem is without the building permit, the site was never evaluated. So we have to kind of back up and evaluate the site, knowing that if he needs to move it, it's going to cost him a good deal more than that. So we're trying to avoid that. So let's do as much as we can before he has to invest in that. But he might have to do that. It's cheaper than moving it. That's just my thought. Maybe I'm off on the wrong.
Appreciate you sharing that. Charles? You're muted, Charles.
Yeah, I agree with Norma. I would, to me, excuse me, the fundamental issue has to do with the vehicles and turning around. And if we conclude that in fact
for his application.
Yeah, if we conclude that it, excuse me, I ran out of my tea. If we conclude that a building has to be in the setback,
You want some?
whether it's 23 or 24 or 25 feet in the setback, you know, we have dealt with that without surveys in the past. So I would hate to have the applicants spend money on a survey when that's not the primary concern. If for instance, if I'm convinced that this building does not need to be in the setback, then the survey is irrelevant, right? And so I would hate to have put the applicant through that expense if it's not going to influence my decision. That's just the way I see this. It's, if there's a way to deal with the most critical issue first, and then if we decide that, well, maybe it really does matter exactly whether it's 23 feet or 27 feet from the wall or from the property line. So I'll shut up.
Ron, do you want to speak to that too? You know, kind of.
I'm sorry, me, Joseph?
Yes, yeah.
He's muted.
I guess so. And what I'm going to say is very frank and very blunt. You know, Charles, I hear you, and to a certain extent, I agree with you. But where it ends for me is we're not putting the applicant in that position. The applicant put himself in that position. And that's, you know, what I'm gonna go with here.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Yeah. If you need to unmute yourself.
Who are you speaking to?
The neighbor here.
Nancy's computer.
Yes.
I'm not Hines.
Yeah, hi. Am I on?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think that gentleman just made a very good point. He put himself in this position. So that's part of the problem. I understand that. But part of the solution is if the fire marshal comes and says, I don't think, I'm assuming he's not the one that determines where that house gets located. But he
No,
could say, if that house wasn't there, I might have a little more room. If you moved it back a little bit, I've got more room. So I don't know how they express themselves in terms of the layout. They could just say, I can't get in, I can't get out, or they could say, you got to move the house. You see what I'm getting at? So I don't know how his statement will qualify in the big picture.
Okay.
It has less room.
All right. Arthur.
If you polled the board, you might get a sense of whether or not a survey seems necessary. I just don't see that being in the setback is the only alternative. And if the building isn't there, he has all that land anyway. If the building can be elsewhere on that property. I've looked at topo maps with 2-foot elevations and then visited the property. It's I just don't see the building needing to be in that area. And there's plenty of room for trucks now. If you have a bunch of vehicles parked already up there and there's an emergency, would they block fire truck anyway?
Good point.
Okay. All right. Is there, going to Arthur's recommendation, for those that feel that the survey would be helpful in making their decision?
Would it be helpful to reread the criteria that the applicant used for the placement
Sure.
before we make our vote?
Yeah. Again, what I'm asking for right now is just the
Just vote.
about the survey. If you feel the survey would be helpful in making your decision. So, Charles.
I would say at the end of the process, I mean, that would be the one that would cost him maybe unnecessary money. So I would hold that one off until we get evaluations about
Yeah.
the fire department and so forth.
Yeah, I don't remember who made that comment earlier, but to say, I think actually, Norma, I think it was you, that, if we have the evaluations about the emergency vehicles and then if there's any open violations with the zoning enforcement officer, once we have that information, then that may just resolve it right there. So there's no need for the survey.
It's sort of a contingent requirement.
Right. So again,
we would need this if he was to proceed with the building in the existing location. That is, if he doesn't have to move it. There's no point in getting a survey if he's got to move it. So
again, that could be.
That's where I'd be.
Right. So then that additional expense wouldn't be imposed at this time, again, until we receive that other information, and then we can decide at that point. Okay. Does that sound reasonable from the board?
To me, it does.
Okay. Any further comments? So where we're leaving this at this time, so Mr. Del Forno, what the board is asking in order to help with our determination is to get an evaluation for the emergency vehicles. I'm going to recommend that we have a couple board members at that meeting to arrange that. Who would be
Only 3. You can't have 4 because otherwise that's a quorum.
Thank you. So I'm fine with 2. Is there any that are recommended? You're waving your head, Arthur. Do you have a comment?
It's a board can be in the same place without taking any actions. You could be at a party, you can be, so the board could more than 2 can observe The board isn't taking any actions. They're just observing.
All right, well, I mean, do we have 3 members that want to be present for this? I would ask that 2 be present. So Charles,
I've seen that on a
I'd
particular thing that you can't be on the property with more than, because it would be like a.
Right.
Me, because I don't know anything.
okay. So Arthur,
I'd like
you
to
like
see
to be
Ron.
involved in that? So Arthur and Charles.
And Ron. Ron volunteered.
Ron, you want to be part of that too?
Yeah, sure. I will.
Okay. All right. So Arthur, Charles, and Ron, if you could work on coordinating a site.
Fire chief,
What was that, Arlene?
with the fire chief, they have to, we need to, coordinate schedule.
Just
For the
whoever the
fire
fire
chief.
chief is that covers that area.
East, right?
East Clinton.
Yeah.
East.
Yeah.
East Clinton.
Yep.
And then, with Art.
Don Estes or they're assistant chiefs as well.
Okay.
Can we ask you, Arthur, as our friendly neighborhood?
Yeah.
No, it can't be.
I'm pointing at Russ, commissioner.
Russ, are you the current commissioner? You're a commissioner now?
You're mute,
You're muted, Russ.
mute, unmute.
Unmute us.
Russ, you gotta unmute.
He knows, he's just trying to find the button.
Guy.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm one of the current commissioners. There's 5 of us,
Mhm.
but I don't know if that would create.
No,
Yeah,
yeah, we won't involve you with it.
We can find out who to call.
Art is past commissioner, and he's familiar with Don Estes. I don't know if it might be more appropriate for him to ask. I have no problem doing it as long as everybody thinks it's fine. But I
Yeah,
don't know.
no, we'll have Arthur, Charles, and
We'll
Ron.
have somebody, it's a
Coordinate.
very sensitive case.
We could always push the work off on Arlene to send a letter of request.
However, the 3 of you work together on getting that done. Arthur, would you be willing to spearhead that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Maybe Art, they could really bring the fire truck over there.
No.
Well, unfortunately, for the winter months, the fire chief does not allow the fire truck to go over Sheltsville Road unless it's a fire on Sheltsville Road because of the condition of that dirt road.
Yeah.
So normally he bars the fire engine, the big one, from going over Sheltsville Road unless it's a fire there. So barring you lighting that house on the hill, I don't think you're gonna want to go up there with a truck.
I think Don can scope it out without taking a truck.
Yes.
And if you ever have to call the fire department, I don't care if you have to light a match, say you see flames, then.
All right. Okay, and then the second is, so Mr. Del Forno, you'll work on getting things worked out with the CEO. All right. Okay, so again, we're going to table that at this point. So I'd like to make a motion to table this until the next meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that being said, thank you for attending, those of you who are part of the case. And we're going to continue on with the review of our minutes and any other discussion that the ZBA needs to be involved with.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Take care, folks.
I had to plug in, so I had to move, and I'm going to move back to look at the minutes. I'll be wandering around the house in the dark, or it'll look dark.
All right.
You wanna just give me all your thing? It's 10:15.
I sent
You
it.
guys are all home. I'm still at work on my stuff.
Okay, so
We're still at work and we're not paid, so.
there, let's see. Charles, did you send your revised minutes?
Yeah, he sent it to me.
Okay, no, I think they responded to. All right. Okay, so do we have the minutes up and ready to,
Oh, do we still have to put the minutes in?
what's that?
Sorry.
Do you still want me to put it up? Why don't you just discuss it?
No, I mean, we're good. Everyone have it there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have only one comment. I'll be a minute or two myself before I get to the other computer.
Please
Okay.
don't say anything about the sloppy, please.
So on page 1, any changes?
I don't have it in front of me where it is, but the address,
You need to put Charlie's up.
I'm trying to look on my, my,
Email. I could email it to you right away.
let's see.
Sent it over at 6:39, John.
Just as a comment, you know,
6:39.
I'm commenting here. We're holding on. We're pausing while people find stuff. You know, all of you in your involvement, you're just a great group of people. So really appreciate your comments, your diversity.
Hey,
how
this
you
is our
think about the
latest
situation.
meeting. Take note, the very 1st of January.
So, but
Seriously.
thank you all for going through this. You know, it's late. It's 10:17. You're still here, and giving the applicants who, again, in this particular situation, as you can hear, have placed themselves in challenging situations. But you know, your comments and the diversity of comments, just appreciate you and all that you've done. And Norma, you did a great job in putting together the talking points. This was a challenging, you know, it was very challenging. So again, just to really appreciate the good group of people that we have here. So
Can I give you, I'm sorry, announcement?
I
Anybody
tried to-
wants to move up planning board? There's a vacancy on planning board.
move up. What are you
That's
talking
not a move.
What?
It's
Two
not
times
two
a month?
meetings.
I would like to make a comment.
No, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, Russ.
Okay, I forgot who said on the planning board. I watched that video twice, and I was a little taken back by the one gentleman that said that this was going to go to the ZBA now because we're the ones that make the big bucks.
Right.
That was a joke. That
You
was a joke.
Somebody got to tell them that we don't make any bucks at all.
They know. That was sarcasm.
They know that, and they meet twice a month. And
They
to
know.
tell you the
They
truth,
meet. That
they
was
do-
sarcasm.
they do almost, well, they do a good portion of the work we'd have to do if they didn't do it. So
They do a lot more work than we do, folks.
But my husband's on the planning board, so the only rule in our house is we can't talk about it if the lights are out.
And you go turn the lights out all the time, huh?
Well,
Go ahead.
you know what I mean. But anyway,
Ron's trying to.
Joseph, to your point, I want to make an apology to the board for my comment. I hope I didn't offend Charles. It just got me a little aggravated that, you know, the way this applicant, the way the applicant has proceeded has disturbed me a bit. And you know, I really do feel that he put himself in that position. I didn't want to insult Charles, but I felt
Look, we've been disagreeing with each other on this board I've been on the board for a dozen years, and
Right.
we've all learned to develop pretty thick skins. And I thought your point was right on, Ron. I was trying to figure out how not to say that myself.
Well,
That was actually right.
he put himself in a position, but I have to wonder how many other people have you had before the board, which were the same thing, where you had existing violations which they've created and then came and got variances for it. So it's like, yeah, the guy did it himself and he deserves the blame, but you can't say, well, because of that, you can't move ahead, you know?
Yeah. 2 comments. One, just remember we're still live.
Yeah, but here, let me just say it.
And then secondly, it is part of the challenge that we have because again, we're looking at this like it's not our purview, so to speak, to impose fines and do all of that.
Right.
And to take a look at that to say,
You
okay,
do.
if this is coming before us, we have to consider this and the situation and look at it objectively. That can be difficult to do.
And he's getting a fair shake.
I have to apologize. Sorry, Russ, I got a little excited. I spent an incredible amount of time.
I'm sure you did, Norma. It was a,
But I need to apologize. Because I got excited before you said anything. To put talking points together that had no emotion in them and no opinions. They were just things that need to be resolved. And I'll tell you, it took a lot of time and even the timeline. So that's what I was working on, and I hope, sorry, I get a little excited now. I didn't used to, I do now. So my apologies. I had taken out accusing anybody of saying something, you know, on blah, blah day when something happened on another blah, blah day. I just worked very hard on that. And when he sort of got in my face a little bit at the beginning, you know, the hair went up on the back of my neck and you got the brunt of it. So.
And Norma, I'd like to say you came back from that moment very, very well.
Oh, did I?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I wanted to like.
You set those points forward in the most objective way that you could have.
I just told him, back off, you know. So,
I would have.
well, Jerry knows enough too, but anyway. Thank you for understanding. It's
I'm so glad this is your case.
It wasn't.
I had coffee.
Question of all the last minute.
This is actually one of the hardest I've ever had.
Yeah.
And Marlene, how long have I been on the board?
Oh my God. 16? I don't even
No,
know.
it's more than that.
All right, I'm going to bring us back to the minutes now. So
Okay.
Oh, Joseph.
I'll get wrapped up here. So page 1, was there any other items on page 1? Or any at all?
I can only comment in general because I made a list. I don't have the pages in front of me, and for some strange reason, I can't open it at the moment. But when you get to comments, Gina Palmer made a comment. She lives at 1082 Bull's Head, not at the neighbor's house.
Huh?
1062.
Wait, what did I put?
Well, when you identified that her making.
What's your address? What's her address? I know because she did not identify herself, and I forgot your address.
Her address is 1082 Bull's Head.
Sorry.
Okay. Just for the record.
I know you don't want her to move out.
I know where she lives.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Okay. So page 2, we have. It's an oddly shaped property. Is that one of the corrections?
You've got mine in track changes.
Yeah,
so.
he's reading it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other corrections on page 2?
Suggestion.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's the second paragraph about the recusal to their connection to the fire district. We're not connected to the department.
I wasn't sure whether you're wrong.
Where Mr. Forschler is chairman of the Board of Commissioners.
So give me a word. What do I use instead of connection?
Excuse me?
What do I use instead of the connection?
Association.
No, connection is fine. Connection to the fire, strike department and insert district.
And wait, you're breaking up.
District, fire district. Instead of fire department, fire district.
Okay.
Leave in place the next 5 words where Mr. Forsher is, then change it to chairman of the Board of Commissioners.
Oh my God, I made him a member. Okay.
He is a member, but the relationship that's important is, as far as I'm concerned, he's also, we interact with him on the board, not on the department level.
Yeah. Okay.
Arlene, let them know when we get to the one you like the best.
No, I already said to them, do not discuss the sloppiness.
Slopping.
Okay. Anything else on page 2? All right. Page 3. Okay. Page 4. We just have the very end last paragraph, which Charles has, which is sloped, wooded. Page 5, and has wetlands, and a couple other, and the third paragraph that starts Mr. Canham shared Mr. Tompkins' view. Just a few corrections there. It says grant a variance when it is not clear. Those words added is not clear. And then at the end of that paragraph, for the purpose of future cases.
What page are you?
On 5, if you have Charles's notes, those are already in there.
He's just reading my
Yeah,
track changes.
yeah, exactly.
Arlene.
Oh, okay.
And the other one's just a couple words added. Page 6, anything? Okay, page 7. And page 8. Okay, I would like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Any other further discussion to come before the Zoning Board of Appeals this evening?
Just one thing, you know, I did one of my training things and thinking, I'm never gonna learn anything new. I've been doing this for a long time. They made a point that we cannot require members of the public to give their name or their address.
Oh.
Because the applicant could
I
Go
said
after them.
that, yes,
go after them.
yes.
And that they were quite emphatic on this.
Totally.
And then here's the other weird thing. They said you should not talk to the applicant when you visit their property, which makes no sense to me. But if you do,
With
you
a
have,
happy judgment.
let me finish, Arlene, please. If you do, you have to acknowledge this at the meeting as an ex parte communication with the applicant. That makes no sense to me. I mean, the whole point is, you know, I want them to show me where they're planning to put this thing. It may not be visible, but that's what, they were quite emphatic that you can't require them to give their name and address.
That's
And-
very good.
Can somebody tell me, I mean, I haven't seen, is there any new training coming up anywhere that I can find out about? Because I took the one last year on wetlands, but then I signed up for another one and I never got an email back so I could get into it. I mean, how do we keep track of what's available out there?
Good question.
Yeah.
I can't,
You gotta sign up at the Dutchess County Planning to give, you gotta give your email address. And then this way they will send you something.
Hopefully.
Well, they must have it because they signed me up for the wetlands that I did, you know?
Norma, you got something recently, all the goodies.
There was another one that I signed up for, but then I never got a response back for it. So
Yeah, I did one too.
Jerry and I have already done our 4 hours for the year.
Yeah,
So
for this year,
yeah, and
Yeah.
last year.
there was like 2 in January. And one of them was like watching paint dry. But anyway, we did it.
Interesting. I haven't gotten any new notifications either.
Yeah, Arlene, do you get them?
I used to. I don't know, Norma, how do you
Yeah,
get them?
maybe
But
if
I'm
you-
getting so much email, so.
We just signed up for their, maybe you sign up again because maybe they were a bit confused there for a while.
Arlene, can you send out a link to the board members when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
find
yeah.
that? And then that way we can go through and
Just sign up again and
Yeah,
so you make sure you get them because we're done for the year. We were done for the year in the
Stop
first
bragging, Norma.
January.
All
yeah,
right.
so you need 4 and then you could carry over whatever excess, so. You could-
Okay.
Oh, I didn't, we
Yeah,
can, okay.
So in light of Charles's comment, do you recommend that we stop asking for their name and address?
No, I think you can ask, but if they choose to refuse, at least, and these folks from Department of State were emphatic that you cannot force them to give their name and
Okay.
address.
That sounds reasonable.
How about, Norma on Pumpkin Lane or, I mean, minimum, maximum?
I think if we ask them and if they provide it, then great. And if they don't, we just take their comment anyways.
Just go ahead. Joseph, you always make things so simple.
It may also be wise, depending on if the issue is contentious. I mean, if we were meeting in public space and, well, what's it, the smoke people?
Yeah,
You know,
we don't
yeah,
need.
maybe then we wouldn't want to identify.
Yeah, right, because we're live right now all over, so it's very.
Okay, all right, any,
I
so,
move
and then,
we adjourn.
yeah, the other piece would be, if we speak to the homeowners, we need to just mention what we discussed.
They were
You
again
wanna
emphatic
join and you
about
want to talk, you could do that. You're not
One-
live.
one
Right now you're live.
One concern I have, Charles, is your dog dead?
that. No, she's waiting for me to go up to bed because she's gonna climb in with me.
I thought it was a blanket.
Okay, I'd like to make a
Is it a
motion to
dog?
adjourn the zoning board meeting.
I'll second it on that note.
Yeah, but hang on, I just want to say, I couldn't think of a nicer group of people to work with, and thank you very much.
Yeah, this is great. And Joseph, you are a great leader.
Absolutely, Joseph, once again.
Blanket, it's a dog,
Smooth.
okay?
You must have been a riverboat gambler in another life. You're so.
That's right.
Fred, we're adjourned, Fred. You could take us off live.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Fred.